Our scripture lesson for today is found in 1 John chapter 3, verses 16 through 24. And when John wrote this letter to the early Christians, they were being bombarded by all sorts of false beliefs. And in these verses, John is asking the people to love one another, so take action on the love. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers. If anyone has material possessions and sees his brother in need, but has no pity on him, how can the love of God be in him? Dear children, let us not love with words or tongue, but with actions and in truth. This then is how we know that we belong to the truth, and how we set our hearts at rest in his presence whenever our hearts condemn us. For God is greater than our hearts, and he knows everything. Dear friends, if our hearts do not condemn us, we have confidence before God and receive from him anything we ask, because we obey his commands and do what pleases him. And this is his command, to believe in the name of his Son, Jesus Christ, and to love one another as he commanded us. Those who obey his commands live in him and he in them. And this is how we know that he lives in us. We know it by the Spirit he gave us. Here ends the lesson.
There once was a guy who had been married to the same woman for 50 years, but not once in all those 50 years had he told his wife that he loved her. Hard to imagine that. Of course, she was very frustrated. She was very disappointed. They'd raised 5 children together. They shared half a century of absolute fidelity. They had provided for each other and for the family all the material and physical needs, yet not once in all that time had her husband expressed his feelings to his wife. And finally, she'd had enough, so on the evening of their 50th wedding anniversary, she grabbed her husband's calloused hands. He was a farmer, and she looked into his eyes, and she spoke firmly to him. "Sweetheart," she said, "we've lived together as man and wife for 50 years now, and I can't recall the last time you ever told me you loved me. So I'm wondering, do you? Do you love me? If so, I need to hear you say it." Well, this rather stoic gentleman looked sternly at his wife, and he answered. He said, "Do you remember our wedding day 50 years ago when I stood up and confessed how I felt about you right there in front of the minister and our family and our friends? Do you remember?" "Well, yes, of course I do," she assured him. "But that was 50 years ago." "Well," he said, "nothing's changed." And I want to say to you on behalf of the disciple John, because I think he would say this, if you're no more expressive than that tight-lipped fellow was, it's not likely you will ever be accused of being a loving and compassionate person. How would you like somebody looking down at you saying you're not a loving or compassionate person? Here's a question. If you were accused of being a loving person, and if somebody came and could accuse you of that, would they have enough evidence? Could they recite off all the things that they have seen in your life demonstrating that you are a loving person? Would there be enough evidence to convict you? Unfortunately, there are plenty of Christians in our world today, in our churches today,